good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Beach. I am the principal of Crestmont Investments, a private equity firm based in New York City. We structure direct investments into businesses serving energy, healthcare, and industrial sectors, and over the past several years have become convinced that physical AI represents one of the most important investment themes of the next decade. So I'm honored to be joined by two business leaders who bring complementary perspectives as builders and users with Sophocles Zoullas, founder, chairman, and CEO of Zenith Shipping, who spent decades leading one of the world's premier shipping companies, and Dr. Nicolaus Radford, one of the pioneers of industrial humanoid robotics and CEO of Persona AI. So, gentlemen, we'll jump right in. So, let's see. So we have three questions today we'll go through and let the conversation go where it can. So for our first question, given your collective experience in shipbuilding, energy, and infrastructure, why do you think that these industries will become major adopters of physical AI? And I'll let you start first off.
I'll take that. Can everyone hear me? Okay. He can hear me. You can hear me. So we want to do something a little different for everyone here today. I don't build robots. I'm not a tech person. I have spent almost 40 years in heavy industry, specifically shipping, in an industry that moves 90% of the world's goods every day. And for 20 years, as a user, as someone who needs this technology, we've had labor shortages, inefficient logistics. I mean, you see what's happened just with the Straits of Hormuz. Things that disrupt my world disrupt the entire world. And I see physical AI as the hinge point that my industry's been waiting for 20 years. And I think the moment is now. And we will get into the details in this chat.
I think mainly because the numbers are just staggering. There seems to be like a controversial bifurcation in the embodied AI space, specifically around humanoids. One, from the platform perspective, and that's a whole nother, we can go have a beer and debate that, and it's a fun debate to have. But it's whether these robots are going to be adopted first in domestic use cases that might look like the home, folding laundry, serving coffee, or are they going to be adopted more in the industrial segments? If you look at the numbers, there's about 3.5 billion workers on the planet. About 1 in 4 of them are in the infrastructure industrial complex. Think everything that made this building, to the goods that Sophocles was talking about being shipped around the world, to the energy that's pumped out of the ground, to the cars that are made. That's 1 billion workers. So let's say they work 2,000 hours a year. That is, do the math, 1 trillion. I think that's right? No, 2 trillion hours. 2 trillion hours of industrial labor. So let's say that, we're building some automation technology like a humanoid. We can capture 1%. So no investor typically wants you to capture 1% of a market, but here it might be okay. 1% of that market is 20 billion hours. If we assume that there's a $50 loaded cost, $50 per hour loaded cost, that is $1 trillion. Guys, $1 trillion of revenue per year capturing 1% of the industrial energy complex. The math's just insane. So I know we want to put one robot in every home, and that sounds really compelling, but we're talking like $2 an hour. We're thinking that we might be able to put a robot into the home. The arbitrage in the industrial segments versus the home, it doesn't even make any sense. It's like you would go industrials all day long.
Because it is World Cup soccer or football. Sorry.
Can we avoid the game for the U.S.
No.
from
But
yesterday?
I'm going to bring it into industry. So right now today, there are 2,800 ships on order that frankly have a 3-year backlog because there are not enough people to meet the needs of the world. Okay? And if we were to line up football fields one after the other, that's the equivalent of 10,000 football fields of welding that needs to be done today with the current 3-year orders. 10,000 football fields. That there are not enough. We have a declining workforce and an increasing need. This is not a nice to have problem, everyone. This is a survival that we need to do to meet the economic demands of the world for the next 50 years.
That's just one.
That's just one example.
That's just one example. Yep. And the world's economies are replete with that example over and over.
So speaking to that point, let's talk about the difference between industrial needs, declining labor, yet the ongoing demand for industrial applications, shipbuilding in particular. Just spend a minute on that before we move on to the next question.
I think we all talk about the labor scarcity problem, right? I mean, there's not a good embodied AI pitch out there that doesn't propose to the investors the declining workforce. But if you really dig into the numbers, it's so much worse than that. So the world's population is probably going to hit about 9 billion people before it peels over and starts to be in decline. We're not really sure where it's going to come down to, but we already know replacement rates in countries are not where it needs to be to sustain the current levels of population. So we're looking at, in the next 25 years, so today, there's 1 in 11 people in the world over the age of 65. In the next 25 years, the worldwide average is going to be 1 in 6. It's going to be 1 in 4 in the US, it's going to be 1 in 3 in Europe, it's going to be 1 in 3 in Korea, it's going to be 1 in 3 in Japan. So the problem that we have is that we have a massively aging society. The numbers are already set in stone. We couldn't change it if we wanted to. It's a fait accompli. So we have a massively aging society, plus we have the nature of work is changing. We all want to be YouTubers and influencers. We don't want to be welders, right? So now you have this crashing problem of the demographics that are collapsing and the nature of work has changed. But we all like to have conferences in these buildings. We like to have goods shipped across the sea. All the clothes that everybody's wearing came on those ships, and there's not going to be anybody to sustain it. That is the existential crisis we're really looking at.
If I could just, from a real...
This is a really happy presentation.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Sorry, look,
Solution.
there's depression. It's depressing with a happy ending, okay? So from a use case perspective, we cannot order ships that we need today because the shipyards say, sorry, we don't have the labor. That's my problem. That's not this conference. That's a reality that I'm facing running my business today. And not only that, I think what I hear in the social narrative is, oh, but humanoids or robots are displacing human labor, the social cost of automation. Well, in heavy industry is begging for this solution. I can't talk about the auto factory floor, or I can't talk about other markets, but in heavy industry, mining, energy, global transportation, infrastructure. By the way, infrastructure is about 50 years old, and that needs huge CapEx. Dangerous, I think a perfect home for this solution here.
We move on to the next question. So just to summarize, industrial CapEx is massive, demand is increasing, and labor shortage is real. So what has changed to make physical AI more commercially viable today versus a few years ago, 10 years ago? What makes it work now?
There's been some appreciable tipping points. So a market typically moves on 3 major factors. You have a technology tipping point, you have a social tipping point, you have an economic tipping point. And so if we unpack those 3 things, we can try to understand why this market's moving now. Technologically, which is what everyone's focused on, it's hard to walk around and not be awed, frankly, by the advancements in the last 5 to 7 years. So compute has gotten just super powerful. We can now house enough compute to do the inferencing activities that help tell the robot what to do. It's as simple as that. So now we can create robust action in real time in an environment. The supply chain, the component pieces of the technology have appreciably gotten lower. When I was building humanoids at NASA, I spent 15 years at the agency. 10 of those I was leading the humanoid development lab. And we built a robot. It was a lab prototype. It was Robonaut and Valkyrie. Those robots were about $2 million a piece for prototypes, right? When we flew it to the space station, it got a lot more expensive than that. But at the prototype level, you were still talking about a multi-million-dollar humanoid. We're able to build these now for a couple $100,000 in quantities of one. And that's before we start looking at manufacturing techniques to reduce the price points. So we've got the economies of scale kicking in. We've got the technology tipping points around compute. Vision is basically a solved problem. If you guys remember during the DARPA Robotics Challenge, maybe some of you don't because some of this crowd looks pretty young, but when I was there, you could take a camera into a room and a few minutes later, literally a few minutes later, you could try to assess the objects in the room, and you might be able to understand the position of those objects, and then you might be able to understand how to actually approach those objects with a humanoid manipulator. Now, today, you can take a camera into a room, you can identify all the objects, the pose of those objects, you can plan those trajectories on how you would approach and grasp and use them, and you're doing it at frame rate, which is 30 times a second. So if we went from 2 minutes to 30 times a second, so compute, vision, componentry, and now the social side. So humanoid robots or embodied AI agents, depending. They've invoked some serious emotional, visceral responses. But today, there's much higher social acceptance. We're now walking around automation and rolling automation. There's a AMR out there delivering coffee, right? These are just starting to become accepted pieces in our social architecture. So those three tipping points have made it so that the time is exactly right. And we cannot forget the very fourth important part, which is part of the economics, which is the financiers. So now within every huge market opportunity comes the technologist to fill that, and it has to be financed. And so we actually have an absolute perfect storm between all three of those things happening right now.
I would add a fifth point to that, which is for 30 years, heavy industry has not been very receptive to technology. This is the first time in my career, and I've been doing this a long, long time, that not only is heavy industry receptive to technology, they are begging for it because they are at critical choke points in being able to not just lower the cost, but increase production at a time that they have labor shortages across the entire industrial complex.
So if I could add, I think the ground is fertile, right? We've set the stage, but we still have to deliver. And the robotics community, let's all be very honest, has been very long on promises and short on delivery for a long time. But in my view, this has been turning around rapidly because of the aforementioned advances that I spoke about. And so that doesn't preclude the realities of manufacturing at scale, driving out the cost, creating a machine to put in the field reliably. AI is, it's close. It's not exactly all the way there yet, especially from the embodied level, but it's close. It's close enough that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not an oncoming train. So I think we're getting there, but the robotics community, we still have to deliver, and we frankly have some lost ground to make up for.
Excellent. So Sophocles, I believe you and I have spoken about our mutual opinion that we are in a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. As early movers in investing into physical AI companies. So for both of you, can you elaborate and describe how you envision physical AI will reshape the global industrial complex over the next decade?
I'll start on that one. So it was interesting from an investment perspective. I was sitting where you all are earlier this morning, and one of the presenters said, there are almost no public opportunities to invest in what we're talking about today. It's all in the private space because it's so early. In terms of opportunity, David, just to give you another metric, that 2,800, 10,000 football field long order it's coming out in the next 3 years, that represents about $220 billion of value today. That is struggling. So if even you could tap a little bit of just the 3-year production of just one industry within the entire industrial complex, forget energy, infrastructure rebuild, all the sort of the 106 trillion that needs to be funded by 2040. The need is not a 10-year need, it's a today need. So I think it's something that's actionable now. I know I could use it today.
Okay, excellent. So we have some time for questions. If not, or we can continue on with our discussion. Yeah.
Two questions, Professor Adam Sophocles, Pepsi College. Somebody from Neura was describing something called the Neuraverse. Got two questions, actually. The first one, is there consensus that there needs to be a layer of like a super brain coordinating the different levels? The use case was the example of you don't want to have robots going upstairs to a refrigerator that's empty. You want to have coordination between different functions. You guys buy that? We need a neuroverse overseeing and coordinating all the elements. Two, guys, I was in Africa a lot in South Asia. We have at least 2 billion spare people. I mean, how much has just changing immigration policy come into the conversations around we need robots to take over industrial work? Wouldn't it be cheaper to just change immigration policy in the short term and do some training? Or is that a crazy?
I can take a question too.
Please do.
Or maybe I shouldn't take question two because you want to.
I'm gonna take at least 3 minutes and
Okay.
5 seconds on
Okay.
question one.
Probably should have put that in different
Okay.
ways. We don't have spare humans, but you know what I'm saying. We have still a high birth rate in Africa. Lots and lots of people.
I can answer. I can address that from an industry perspective. Do you want to go first?
I'll try to do question one. It is so. Yes, but it's over what time period? So it is not. It is not inconceivable to think that there is a global executor, and it's called something different by every company because of marketing departments. But at the end of the day, there's a global executor which is coordinating action, and we're aware of it. We're trying to address it, but it's also part of your go-to-market. It's also why we're not going into the most complex environments. The home is chaotic. Everybody's home is different. Depending on how many assets of automation you're trying to coordinate in environments that look like that, there's going to have to be a little bit more world knowledge, understanding about what's going on. You could, however, take the next incremental step from industrial automation. So you've got robot arms on assembly lines doing their thing. What happens with the next step of that when you've got activities that can be a little bit more siloed, that are extremely value add, that are hard to hire for, that have good economics, good use cases, that you don't have to have global neuroverse coordination with? So our plan is we're going to increment slowly to the more and more complex and more asset coordination. So fleet management is a big topic in the industry. So it's a huge question to unpack. But my succinct answer is yes, they're not wrong. Over what time scale and over what environments?
Question two. Am I regretting I'm answering this? Okay. So staying apolitical from an industry perspective. Look, I've been on the board of one of the biggest insurance companies in the maritime space, and my number one concern, the biggest claims, the saddest claims, are loss of life or injury, because these are harsh environments. You know, you have noxious gases, you have hard environments, long work hours. So this is where automating those tasks, where humanoids working with humans, makes humans safer, less claims, higher output, which is a better social benefit for the world. So I think one of the exciting things, having my background in insurance as well, is this is a really welcome element for the human condition.
I want to follow that minefield up with one small addition.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just, from a global perspective, somebody might ask you, you have still regions with massive birth rates, overpopulation, and we're complaining, oh, we don't have enough workers. It begs the question.
And let me check.
Offline, I'll talk to you.
Yeah, so Jevons paradox is going to apply, period. So the more efficient you make an operation, the more you tend to need more of that operation. So it's going to be robots and people. So what we're trying to say is the demand is so big right now that it's going to outpace both those. It's going to outstrip both of those. So it's going to be a robots and people conversation. And there's another aspect to it where the nature of the work that they're doing, to Sophocles' point, let's strip away a layer of things that are killing people. And let's move people into higher cognitive functions, training them into higher cognitive skills, higher educations. That's actually what you should be focused on.
Thank you, and we would love to connect with like-minded investors interested in physical AI and humanoid robotics and interested in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.